Hey guys.
Cheers, my dears. It is Thursday. It is 6 o'clock in the evening on yet another day. Clearly, May is identifying as November this year in the UK. Diabolical weather it is. Welcome to the ABC of CBD. This is show number 34. Unbelievable. Ollie and I, who have never met, have spent 34 hours together just doing these shows. Thank you so much for listening to Men's Radio. www.mensradiostation.com. You can see us on Twitter, and of course on our YouTube channel. If you do visit us on our YouTube, just Men's Radio Station on YouTube channel, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It means so much to us, and it'll take you 7 seconds, if that. Lee Mallet, good evening to you.
What's up, Lee?
What's up? I don't know.
What up?
If I had a hammer. Anyway, listen.
Do you remember the Budweiser advert? Do you remember that? Is it not called anymore? What's that? It's done, isn't it? It's like 20 years old now.
I had to do a COD version of it for a radio station. It was very, very odd. Anywho, we've got a very exciting guest who I've just met. We've been chatting for a couple of minutes, and I think we're all in for a treat. Wherever you're listening, all around the world, thank you so much for joining us. And now back to our host, because I'm just a passenger here, he's good, guys. Lee Mallet's good. Okay, Mr. Oliver Mammon.
What's up, guys? So today we're going to talk about mental health. I know it's incredible. So we're going to talk about cannabis, mental health, and the truth behind it. Our guest today is Dr. Rebecca Moore. She's incredible. She's been a doctor for like 20 years. So she's a real doctor. You know, she's not someone who's pro cannabis. She's someone who's been through the system and she's no, but you have some people, like dentists are not real doctors, and paleontologists are not real doctors.
Whoa, careful with the dentist thing.
Just throwing it out there. Do you know what I mean? Like if I get a dentist to come on and be pro cannabis, I'll be like, well, he's a dentist. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have a consultant psychiatrist.
You want to get that dentist.
True. That is very true. I love dentists. All of you dentists, I love you.
I'm very excited, Ollie. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I am very excited because the whole tenet of Men's Radio Station and Women's Radio Station is all about mental health and well-being. So I'm doubly thrilled, not just to be doing this show, and hi, Melanie Hutchins, hi to you, but to be doing a show which revolves around mental health. Back to you, Ol.
And it's really important that we shed some true light on this subject. Before I move in with my introduction and we bring the guest on, let's play the advert and then we can move swiftly on with the show. Yeah? Good. I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD. A product created by users for users. A product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service. The cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price.
I always love the look on the guy's face. He opens up the box and you think, ooh, like there's a magic charm inside.
I just realized something new. Russ, did you ever see Game of Thrones?
Did I ever see Yes.
So I'm just saying that the delivery girl has got a bit of Sansa Stark. She's got like that Kiss by Fire sort of look about her. I'm sure if she turned around, it would be Sansa, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. Never noticed that before.
We don't mess around with our Tincture Club adverts. If we're going to get anybody, they're going to be from Game of Thrones.
Star of Game of Thrones.
Guaranteed. We don't just have anybody.
Anyway, on with the show. Mental health special today, and hopefully we shine some good light on the subject. It's a very expansive subject what we're about to dive into, so we might need a couple of shows. I might bring the doctor on if we don't reach the end of what we want to talk about today. But I mean, I really wanted to dive into this subject, and I wanted to get a like an official opinion, if you know what I mean. I wanted to get someone from a position of authority. So I'm going to do my introduction, then we'll bring on the guest. So one of the main demonizing facts surrounding cannabis consumption globally is the supposed impact cannabis has on mental health. Ideas surrounding the predisposition of cannabis users to mental health issues has been at the forefront of cannabis education for generations. This intrinsic link has been spoken about for decades. if not centuries. For generations, it has been believed that cannabis will cause mental health issues for all potential end consumers. The risks associated with cannabis were deemed to be life-altering, damaging, and threatening. Cannabis will cause madness. That was what people believed. Unfortunately, assumptions relating to the harm caused by cannabis have plagued this emerging medicinal space, and any positive association cannabinoids have with health have been shadowed and drowned by this overbearing, over-discussed, unsubstantiated fact. Now, as a global population, we now know better. But unfortunately, irreversible damage has been done, and the stories that we have heard for many years regarding the negative associations of cannabis are fully ingrained into the way we think. Over the last couple of weeks, we have discussed the demonization of cannabis, the false information surrounding this plant, and the associated legal repercussions. The myths affiliated with mental health stemming from cannabis have been at the focal point of a political crusade against cannabis, culturally, recreationally, and medicinally. These myths carry so much negativity for cannabis and its end consumers. These myths have dictated our laws, they've dictated the way we have been penalized, and worst of all, they've dictated what we know to be true. So lies have convinced us of a reality which is not real. Today, we shine some much needed light on this subject, the subject of mental health and cannabis, hopefully bringing some clarity to the topic. In recent years, as understanding and dialogue around the benefits of cannabis have started to become more mainstream, the shadow of mental health still follows cannabis as a demonizing fact, and it is very scary and damaging. As we discussed with Guy Coxall, a lot of research has been conducted in the field of cannabis over the last 130 years. Some of the research was positive and some of it was negative. However, some was pro-cannabis, some was negative. A fair, balanced argument was created. However, we were only taught one side. We've only been taught over the last 100 years the negative impact of cannabis, and a lot of the positive research which has been done, things like Queen Victoria's study, things like the LaGuardia study, which were brought up by Guy Coxall in his most recent report, were kind of pushed under the carpet, and the positive effect of cannabinoids on the human body were kind of removed from public thought. What I can't understand is why this positive research and pro-cannabis information was completely ignored. I understand how it was ignored, but I don't really understand why it was ignored. The issue is years of negative bombardment can do a lot of damage, and it's time to reverse that. Doctors are now trying to correct the list of errors which have been instilled through cannabis demonization, trying to correct false information, trying to educate a population, and trying to promote a system where cannabis is not being demonized, destroyed, and ignored. It's easier said than done. The current medical curriculum, so the curriculum which medical students are taught at university, still deems cannabis to be detrimental to end user consumption. Doctors are still telling patients that cannabis can kill them, as we heard from Philip Anthony Bevington, the gentleman who suffered from kidney problems. He went to see his doctor, and his doctor's like, "You can't take cannabis; it will kill you." Even though cannabis is now a legal.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Ollie, the reason I'm laughing, and for those of you joining the show, hi to Lisa James, Mary Jane Podmore, and Lee Durnford. Hi, Lee, you and I have got to talk. Is the reason I'm laughing about Tony Bevington is this. So he went to the doctor. If you're listening to the show and you haven't heard this before, he went to the doctor. He's 81 years old. He's horribly ill. I mean, horribly ill. The doctor, with not much bedside manner, says, "You're going to die." And he says, "Well, I'm thinking I might go and take some cannabis medicine." He said, "You can't take that." And Tony Bevington at 81 says, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, it'll kill you." He said, "Well, hang on, 3 minutes ago, you told me I was going to die." There you go.
So even though cannabis is a legal prescription drug in the UK, it's still demonized by a lot of medical professionals. And the majority of doctors are not changing their historic outdated tone. Today, we're joined by Dr. Rebecca Moore, a pro-cannabis consultant psychiatrist. So she has done a lot of work with mental health. She's been a doctor for 20 years, and she's been involved in cannabis for 2. So the majority of her medical practicing career has been spent not dealing with cannabis. So I think it's very important we all know that she's spent more of her life not dealing with this plant than she has dealing with this plant. Her view on cannabis is a lot more modern and realistic. She is more advanced in her methods than a lot of her colleagues, and she actively works with a wide range of patients, treating them with cannabis. I'm sure Dr. Moore sees problem in the broader medicinal system in the UK and the views regarding cannabis, and hopefully she's not afraid to speak up on today's episode. I think she's going to enlighten us all and basically give us all an education, which we really very much need. So let's bring on our very special guest.
Timing is everything.
Hello. What's up, Doc?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I don't want to be rude, Rebecca. I've been sitting in reception here for 25 minutes. I had a 6 o'clock appointment. Sorry, just back at the
little bit of videography,
GP humor.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
That's okay.
Really, thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. But actually, more importantly, thank you for everything you do for people who need your help. I think it's very important, because I have a feeling if I don't say that now, we're going to carry on with the episode and I'm not going to be able to say that. Thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. I mean, based on my recent analysis, I think there are like 60 doctors in the UK who are actively prescribing cannabis. So, I mean, thank you so much for just stepping up to the plate. But there are about 10,000 doctors in the UK, 15,000 doctors in the UK, and 50 of them are prescribing cannabis. So just to put things into perspective, it's like 0.025% of the entire population of doctors on our little island actually work with this plant. So I just want to say thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for actually doing what you do for patients out there who need you. I mean, it's incredible. So thank you so much. This is where you say, no problem, it's my pleasure. But, I mean, like, it's all good. It's fine. It's fine.
I thought that leaving that Pinterest gap was brilliant, Rebecca. I like you straight away.
I was just listening so hard to you, Ollie. I couldn't.
Well, don't.
Yeah.
It's a good introduction,
taking
right?
every 10th word.
It was a very good introduction.
So bang on. So let's talk about you. So you've been a doctor for 20 years. Okay. You've been a consultant psychiatrist for 20 years. Okay. How did you enter this space? What made you choose to, in the last 2 years, what's made you choose to come into the cannabis space, and why you, why not your colleagues? What makes you so different? Why do you see what they don't see? I mean, just answer all of these questions, which I'm going to be throwing out at you. Let's start with this. Why did you enter the space?
One at a time. It's okay.
Sorry. I'm very excited to have a doctor.
Yeah, I can see.
So I've been interested in it since about 2015, probably, when I traveled to the States a lot, and I was really aware of how things in the States were much more advanced. And I worked in a couple of clinics with doctors there who were using CBD, who were prescribing. And it always comes back to the people that we're working with for me, because, just seeing people come in reporting these, immense changes in their quality of life, about their pain, about their mood, about their sleep. So I just thought, wow, I need to know, more about this as a choice for people, as an option for people. And so then when, I was aware that things were moving forward finally in the UK, I was just really keen to be involved from the very beginning. And also, I think, it's really exciting as a practitioner to feel like you're at the beginning of this new field of medicine, that, you're sort of pushing the frontiers of different ways of thinking. And that's just really appealing to me as well. Personally, I think it's a really amazing, sort of dynamic, rapidly changing field of medicine. And it's good to be involved in that.
Rebecca, can I just ask you this before, because I know Ollie's got
talk. I want to get this conversation going. I just So after last week, I wanted to have a list.
Oh, bless him. Bless him. I never make one note. It kind of shows. Anyway, when you decided to do this, and I totally get that you wanted to be part of the brave new frontier. I totally get that. Did your colleagues support you on this? Obviously, I'm not asking names. I mean, generally speaking. No, did they just say, what the hell's happened to Rebecca? She's gone round the bend.
I think it's fair to say it was very mixed. So some people, I think, were very supportive. Some people were very curious. Some people really wanted to know more. A lot of people were very overtly critical. Why are you doing that? Why would you want to do that? What's the evidence? So very, very mixed. And, can I just finish one thing?
Sorry.
It did make it feel quite scary in a way. Amazing support from colleagues and peers that are in the field. But it felt like sort of sticking your head above the parapet a bit, because myself and a couple of other colleagues were some of the very first prescribers in the UK, and a lot more people have come on board now, which is brilliant. But it did feel a bit scary, to be truthful.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to say that you work with psychiatry. You don't work with like pain management. Okay. And what I found is like the doctors who deal with pain management are a little bit more, they have a problem they want to deal with, and they know cannabis can deal with that. Because you're dealing with psychiatry, you've got this whole wall of problems which you kind of have to go up against, this mental health issues and the psychosis issues and everything like that, which I assumed your colleagues are more likely to, like psychiatry-based colleagues are more likely to throw at you. Now, one thing which I wanted to ask just quickly as a sort of secondary question, did you find that maybe the colleagues who were kind of promoting you to do it were also keeping their head below ground? So like, it's great you're doing this. You're like, why don't you join me? And they're like, well, I'm not going to do that. Did you find there was a lot of that as well? That, people were almost encouraging you to kind of jump off the bridge first?
No, I don't think anybody was sort of encouraging me to do that. But I think there's a lot of people who privately would say, I think it's brilliant, I think it's great, but wouldn't publicly say it.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of interest and curiosity, and there's a lot of people, for example, that are coming to training, but that isn't translating into the number of prescribers. So people want to come and learn more, but then most of them don't go on to prescribe. So there's still a big sticking point between people being interested, but then still not wanting to prescribe.
Do you know why?
See, here's an interesting point, Dr. Moore. I'm being more formal now, if you notice.
You don't have to call me Dr. Moore.
No, I do. You've got a doctor in front of you. This is marvelous.
She's really good, so she deserves to have the doctor there. That's the most important
so.
thing. So it's like,
goodness sake. Absolutely. Lee Mallet says, it's really interesting because this is really echoing what you're saying. I face the difficulty of explaining the benefits of cannabis to the public within my store for 15 years. Blimey. It's truly like banging your head off the wall, trying to get one person at a time to see things in a new light. And sometimes, Lee, and I'm sure our guests would agree, it does take one person at a time. That's what it takes. If you've got to do it that way, that's all there is. Don't have an alternative,
And I think a lot of people's, position on it comes with no education behind it, and just this sort of view that, it's an illegal drug, it's bad, it's going to cause psychosis. But then actually, when you start to explore that with people and talk to them about it, I think most people are really open to shifting and saying, oh, I didn't know that, that's been really helpful to have that conversation. But there's a lot of work to be done around educating medical professionals. For sure.
So Rebecca, where did we get? You see, I know nothing about this industry. We've done 34 shows now, so it's a huge educational rocket ride for me. Ollie's in the industry. Where did it start from? That if you take this, two things: one, it's a gateway drug, and in about 5 minutes you're going to be sitting in Covent Garden shooting up heroin, and two, it's going to affect you mentally. Where did all that, and I've asked many guests this, and I'm very interested from a professional viewpoint.
I mean, I think for the latter one, probably if you look at a lot of the studies from sort of the 60s, 70s, 80s, the overwhelming narrative was that cannabis is a cause of psychosis. And it wasn't any more detailed than that. It was assumed that there's kind of this linear correlation, that nothing else was really explored or going on. And, there is absolutely a small proportion of people for whom cannabis can make them more psychotic, but it's a small proportion of people. And, for example, I did my training in South London at the Maudsley, where percentage-wise of the population, a lot of people use cannabis, and it just has never translated into if we've got this many people using, we would expect then to see this, reams and reams of people being psychotic, whereas in reality we don't see that. So there isn't a direct correlation. There is more. Of course, it's much more nuanced than that. It's about genetics and your diet and your environment, and there are a million different things that are at play, of which cannabis is one. But I think the view held within psychiatry for a very long time was very much that cannabis is all bad in relation to your mental health.
So interesting. You are supporting everything that Ollie's been making this very point with the statistics. If you have X thousands of people using cannabis, you'd expect it to be like The Walking Dead out there, and it's not. So something's amiss.
What I don't understand, Dr. Moore. I like Dr. Moore. It sounds fantastic.
It's good.
So what, what I don't understand is how come. So you were in a system for 20 years where you're being bombarded with the same negative information as everyone else. How come you saw through the garbage and no one else can? Because now, I'm always talking about it from a patient perspective, and my whole journey has been from a patient perspective. I didn't start my life in the cannabis space. I started my life in school when I went to university, left university, never ever dreamed in a million years I would ever be able to have a legal cannabis company. Never thought I would ever be involved in this space. So I've come from a different area. So I've lived it. Now you were educated and you were taught that cannabis was bad, because that's what all psychiatrists are taught, that cannabis is bad. How come the tricks didn't, how come that I don't know, education didn't stick with you and you kind of just shrugged it off? 90% into your career, you were like, you know what, actually I'm going the other way. How did that happen, and how do we make that happen with everyone else?
Well, look, it's not about, shrugging it off. It's about being a scientist. It's about questioning data constantly. And above that is listening to the people that you're working with, and so what you've also got running alongside that is hundreds of thousands of patient stories of how effective and helpful this is for them. And, you ignore that at your absolute peril. And unfortunately, we have a system where the randomized controlled trial is considered to trump people's narrative, whereas in fact you have thousands of years of data and stories of people telling you how helpful this is for their mental health. So I suppose, for me, I have seen cannabis be harmful for people's mental health, and I would not deny that, but it's about seeing the whole picture. It's about listening to people telling you about their experiences. And I suppose, for me also, I have a real interest in trauma and how that shapes people's lives and experiences. And, it's really following the early work of cannabis being used for PTSD and seeing, how effective that could be. So it's all about choice for people, for me. It's not right for everyone, but it absolutely should be a choice for everybody. It should be, we should give people all the options.
I love the scientific approach. I love the scientific approach, because there's so much data out there which supports the argument that it's not negative, and it's so beautiful, because this is what we needed to show. This is what we need to hear. This is what the general population, who only know one side, because 99.5% of all doctors are preaching one thing and 0.05% of doctors are preaching something else, less even. And what happens is no one really gets to hear what you're saying, Rebecca. No one gets to hear that. And it's the main reason we wanted to bring you on, and it's so important. And you honestly, it's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming, because it really is important.
Let me ask you this. It is very important, Ollie. You're absolutely right. I'd like to drill down a little bit, if I may. So with your patients, and I'm not asking you to reveal anything that's of a personal or private nature, but with your patients, is the cannabis that you're prescribing, I'm using the word prescribing, I'm assuming that's right, is that going along with counseling and with weekly or bi-weekly sessions and pharmaceuticals, or just counsel? I mean, what's the mix?
So it's completely unique to each person. For some people, they're coming in on 6 different medications that to me don't really make any sense. And, you might add in the cannabis and then start to rationalize their medication. The aim would be to get them on less medication. Some people are having therapy as well. Some people are using exercise. It's got to be bespoke to each person.
Yeah.
I don't really like kind of tick boxy medicine. I think you listen to that person and what they bring to you and what they want from you, and you work collaboratively together. I don't want to tell somebody what to do, because no point if they don't want to do it. You want to work together. But most people coming to clinic, I suppose, would probably have on the whole tried numerous different things and either had severe side effects or felt that it just didn't quite suit them, or they've tried lots of therapy, because to prescribe we have to fulfill this criteria of last resort. So we have to evidence that people have tried lots of other things before we prescribe cannabis. So lots of people often have come in and they've had years of trying things and nothing has never quite worked for them.
Yeah. So we've looked at it from the side of your colleagues, with some being pro and some going, I won't touch it with a barge pole. When you're sitting with a patient, when you come up with, have you tried cannabis, what is their reaction to you as a medical professional? Are they surprised or delighted?
I think people, some people are really delighted because they're just thrilled that this can be an option for them. It can be a choice. I think most people are really honest. They will tell you freely what they've tried before, and it's all about you making them feel safe to be able to tell you that. And some people, I think most people are really curious. Most people are really open to it. Yeah. And particularly because they can use an oil, they can vape. There are lots of different choices within.
It's very personal.
Exactly. Yeah, it's completely personal. And for me, I really like the fact that instead of it just being, this is your tablet, it's one dose, this is your tablet, this is it, this is how you take it. You can say to people, you can change when you take it, you can change how you take it depending on your mood. It's really beautiful and personalized for people, and that is empowering for people.
Yes.
Dr. Moore, it's also like, so I have Tourette syndrome. I take a tablet called Depakote. All right. I also medicate with CBD, but I've been taking Depakote since I was 7 years old. So the fact of the matter is I haven't stopped it. My doctor's actually in discussions with me at the moment about potentially taking me off because he doesn't think that I need it, because he thinks it's not right for my Tourette syndrome anyway. Now, he wants to change it because in his mind, like, it's that whole idea of, if it's broken, you try and fix it. If it's not broken, you leave it the same. And he's basically looking at me and was like, I'm not saying it's broken, but it's not working. So, I mean, this is not like the Depakote you're taking, the 500 milligrams a day. It's not making a difference to your life. So we're going to try and remove it. So I assume that's the way doctors look at it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Does that mean that you see the current psychiatry industry as slightly broken, hence why you're trying to fix it?
No, I mean, there are lots of psychiatrists.
That was an assumption, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there. It's a leading question. It was a leading question.
It was. No, I'm not going to go down that path. There are lots of colleagues that are unbelievably skilled and talented and wonderful psychiatrists. And I don't believe that the entire system is broken at all. There are huge pressures on the system. COVID has exacerbated that. There are long waiting lists. There's not enough money. There's not enough money put into mental health. There are years of reasons why the system was really working flat out all the time. But I think, sometimes what can happen for people is that they fall between services. The whole way we work, I feel, is far too reactive rather than preventative. We wait for people to be in absolute crisis often, and then we offer them a service. Whereas of course it should be the other way around. And cannabis, it can work really well with that, because it can mean that people aren't getting to crisis point and they aren't having the sort of extremes. But the system has some wonderful, wonderful people within it. But I think particularly within the NHS, often things can be that perhaps you have to follow a certain pathway, and
the
that's
protocol.
and that's your choice. Whereas, I think that's not going to fit everybody clearly. And what you really want is to have people be able to go in the way, in the direction that works for them. So, I think cannabis is great sometimes for that, in offering more options. And it might sit alongside other prescribed medication. It might sit alongside therapy. We can co-work with the NHS as well.
Amazing.
I think we should all collaborate together more.
I'd like to, let me catch up on some of the comments here, if I may. Mary Jane Podmore. It's a shame your name isn't Mary Jane Podcast. That would be genius. Be the change you want to see. I love that. Isn't that cool? Be the change you want to see. That's great. Sandra Brady, we are watching. She's probably from the Inland Revenue. That's quite scary, actually. Craig Richard, who sounds like a cross between Cliff Richard and Craig David. Hopefully they will replace Bedrocan. Craig, I'm showing my ignorance. I don't know what that is.
Bedrocan's what Talim Montgomery's daughter takes. It's the product they were taking from Holland.
Right. Okay.
So many examples I get to throw out to Russ, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about when I throw out a show example.
No, I'm a bit of a PhD in this. Hopefully they will replace Bedrocan soon with something much better. Barry J. Allen, the Flash as we call him, very informative. Thank you, Barry. Now, Lee Durnford, who is a terrific fellow, he says this. Now, part of this has been answered by you, Dr. Moore. What evidence has made you and the other GP support cannabis? I think Dr. Moore's covered that. And
Data.
what conditions is it mostly prescribed for? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, so mental health wise, it's prescribed for anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, insomnia. And then obviously the other big ones are pain, epilepsy. It's prescribed now in palliative care for people with sort of end of life care.
Yes.
And it's also being prescribed, which is really interesting, to support people with alcohol dependence in being able to stop. So loads and loads of reasons why it might be prescribed
because
for people.
Many people don't realize. We've had loads of guests, not on this show, but over the 2 years we've been doing men's radio. And I had no idea, because I thought coming off drugs would be terribly difficult. And of course, all the experts that we've had in when we had the studio and everything before COVID were saying, no, coming off alcohol is infinitely more dangerous and a very hard path to follow. I had no idea. That stunned me.
Yeah, and there's sort of growing literature base that actually cannabis can be used really effectively to help people stop drinking and can actually stop craving to drink
and
as
same
well.
with morphine. Same with morphine, as in
exactly.
It's all forms of dependency, because it's it's the receptors which are clucking for all of these different compounds. Your body gets to control them. I wanted to ask you something quickly. This is not on my list, but I just thought about this because it's something which I've actually wanted to bring up to a doctor. So most prescription meds which you give someone for a mental health issue do not automatically work. It's like you have to take them for 3 weeks before they start working.
Yeah,
and cannabis is actually very fast acting. Most people who consume cannabis will feel the effects of it immediately. And even if you're taking a low dose of CBD, if you're a sufferer with anxiety, you will feel that, or you should feel the benefit straight away if you're taking the right dose for your ailment. Have you found that as a prescriber that you get more instantaneous sort of like a more instantaneous communication from your patients who are experiencing relief from the cannabis you give them over a pharmaceutical product?
I think it depends. I mean, I think if somebody's vaping, then yes, they can often feel an effect very, very quickly. So for sleep or for pain or for anxiety, for sure. I think with the oils, it takes a little bit longer. And I normally try and set a framework for people just so that, they're not getting frustrated. I think a lot of the oils people find a cumulative effect. And really, you need to say to them, actually, it might take 2 or 3 months before you really notice this, because some of the changes can be quite subtle initially for people, I think. But for sure, I've had people with chronic insomnia that haven't slept for years and years and years, and within a week of taking oil at night, they're sleeping.
I did that for
Wow.
I did that for you, mate. Russ, I did that for you in the first week of this show.
I just can't remember all. Yes, he did. I just he did, because I have shocking. I don't get there.
It's incredible people's response.
Yeah,
it's incredible people's response.
It is incredible, but it's very rare that you're getting feedback from people. this is miraculous, this is life-changing, this is, and literally I get it multiple times a month with medicinal cannabis. It's
Amazing.
so satisfying.
So wait,
as a
rephrase that.
clinician.
So you're saying that usually with most medicine, so most pharmaceutical medicines, you won't get that response from a patient, but you're saying with cannabis, you are getting that response from a patient.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure you'll get, medications that people find helpful, but I think you rarely get somebody saying, this is life-changing, this is miraculous. Whereas, I've had lots of people say that to me about their medicinal cannabis. I think particularly with trauma and PTSD, it can be really, there's something going on with the way it works that it just seems to affect people's whole memory in a really amazing and fascinating way. And I'm really looking forward to there being more and more research about this.
So what I'm putting it in very simple layman's terms, if I may. It takes away the bad memories of the trauma. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So with PTSD, basically, it's a memory disorder. So instead of you sort of filing away your memories into your long-term memory, they just sit in your head all the time.
Ooh.
So you're constantly reliving and replaying things, or that might be also in nightmares in your dreams.
Yeah.
And people talk about the memories. The memories reducing, those traumatic, distressing memories reducing. It works really well for nightmares for people. But also I've had lots of people talk about the fact that they've started to remember positive memories, that it was almost like there was no space in their mind because they were constantly full of negative memories.
Yeah.
And as they've disappeared, they've started to be able to think and remember events that they haven't remembered for years as well. So really incredible to watch people go through
I'll tell
that
you what else,
process.
if you want to lose your memory, take statins.
Yeah.
Jesus. I thought it was shocking. Anyway, that's another story. And you're not...
Doc, so as someone who's, I've gone through trauma in my life, cannabis has really helped me. I found that there was always a really nice correlation between cannabis and the narrative cure. So, like the idea of like Foucault's narrative cure, where you basically, you depict and you write your trauma. And I always found that, it was like a really good kind of a self-imposed therapy, which I put on myself.
Ollie, there's a load of people watching and I'm lost here. So just slow that bit down, because you're writing down you're physically writing. I'm sorry.
So there's this thing called the narrative cure. The narrative cure is when you narrativize your trauma, and what happens is you externalize your trauma onto paper, so you don't have to carry it around with you anymore. So as opposed to the thoughts being here, you put it here, and once it's here, it's there forever. So you can kind of release it from your brain. That's the way I kind of identified with it. Now, I always found that, once again, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a philosopher. I mean, it was just my interpretation of a sociological idea, which I picked up along the way. But I found that it really helped with cannabis. And I found that a lot of the time, what I was writing wasn't necessarily what happened, but it was the way I felt that it happened. And it was an incredible sort of, you could call it therapy. Do you know what I mean? It was an incredible therapy I put myself through.
Well, it's journaling. Right. It's essentially journaling. And there's a lot of evidence about the use of journaling in trauma. And you describe it really well, Ollie. So you take it from your mind and put it on paper. And lots of people talk about feeling sort of lighter, or that they've got rid of something. And, it's also a lot about trauma is that sometimes you cannot speak it yet, but you can write it. So it can be really, really powerful for people where they just can't begin to talk about it, but they can write it down.
It's interesting you say this, Ollie, because you think that I would be, in our usual relationship, taking the mickey out of you. But of course, my first book, which is called Shout at the Moon, which is an autobiography, it was completely cathartic because it was all about the events with my wife's cancer. So I get that. And also, I hardly remember it because it's all in the book. Right. What was I going to say? Right. My next question, again, if I may, Dr. Moore. Do you like the way that we flip between Becca and Dr. Moore?
I do. Yeah.
Okay,
Keeps me on my toes.
Because we're so impressed that you're a doctor. We're so excited because we could be
every so often we forget that you're a doctor and we're like best mates now. So it's like, what's up, Becca?
We're pals.
You know what I mean?
we're off to Weatherspoons. Anyway, so then we'll be pals. I'm just gonna ask the question. All right. Is there any evidence that once you've prescribed some sort of cannabis medicinal use, that it's addictive?
No.
See, that's fascinating to me. That is fascinating.
And it's unbelievably safe. You know, if you compare cannabis to every other sort of prescribed drug, particularly pain ones, you know, the risks are much fewer.
Well, I was on
tramadol,
so believe me, you are preaching to the converted. Wow.
So important.
And the quality of life scores.
Why do doctors not say this? You're amazing, doctor. You're amazing. This is exactly what listeners need to hear. I mean, like, it's like, honestly, it's blowing me away, because I'm just like, why does no one else say this? I'm just like sitting, I've been waiting 35 weeks for someone to say this. So thank you so much. So what I wanted to ask you, do you want to talk more about PTSD? Because we've got 20 minutes left, and I want you to kind of,
can we just ask, there is a very good question here from Lee Durnford, who's been so supportive of men's radio stations since the beginning. Thank you, Lee. He's not in the medicinal field at all. He's got huge sort of industrial, well, he's a very, very clever fella. Given that and this is addressed to you, given that you're so obviously so supportive of medicinal uses of cannabis, are you aware of any industry drives to roll out its use further across the UK? Is the DOH, Department of Health, looking into it at all? Good question.
Yeah, really good question. So, you know, I think, you know, probably as you discussed and know, at present, it's sitting within private medicine. It's not within NHS medicine, sadly. I think things like Project 21, which is like capturing a big data set of people using cannabis and is linked with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, is a really good starting point to kind of, you know, collect a lot of data, and then also sort of have it tied to a Royal College, which brings it some sort of authenticity within the medical field.
Gravitas.
A little bit of validation.
Exactly. So I think that's really, really helpful. And I think hopefully that will, you know, drive change. I think the Department of Health has looked at it, and, you know, the NICE guidelines have changed slightly for some conditions. And there's definitely been, you know, people have thought about cannabis, but really, you know, it's been very cautious in terms of what's been suggested, and nobody's really outwardly actively said, yes, go ahead and prescribe. So people have not said don't prescribe, but they haven't said, yes, this is a valid and good choice for prescribing. So it, you know, it leaves prescribers in a difficult place. Which is why it's sitting within private medicine still. I really, really hope that it comes into the NHS system. I believe it will, but I don't believe it will be quickly, unfortunately. I think it will take time.
Are they... See, because it's been so taboo, and I thank Ollie for my education on this over 34 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So my view has substantially shifted, and then when we get a guest like you, so eminently articulate and well versed in your field, it adds enormous kudos to the whole.
It's not even about the well versed; it's so authentic.
No, that's the word.
Like, I mean, it's authenticity. I mean, that's what we're getting right now. We're getting an authentic view of someone who works in the medical industry, who hasn't come into it to work with cannabis. So she was already here.
Yeah, precisely. So my question really is, what is the big stumbling block? Now, so many of Ollie's guests, I'm just going to put a preamble here, is that they say, well, it's the pharmaceutical industry. They're going to lose billions because there's no money in making people, this is the party line, there's no money in making people well, because once they're well, they don't need you, right? So we want to prolong it.
I think that's definitely part of it. I think there's a huge amount of caution within the medical field of wanting to rubber stamp this as being something that is good to go without there being lots of scientific trials and data to back it up. So, you know, some of the very senior medical advisors to the government are very cautious about cannabis, and they are just slowing it down. And they want randomized controlled trials to prove the efficacy of cannabis and the safety profile of cannabis, and we don't have those yet.
Nowhere in the world has that. No, like, there's not one country in the world which has legalized cannabis or medicinalized cannabis which does that. You've got systems from Canada, America, Germany, Israel. Not one of them has a standardized system of medical cannabis supply. It doesn't exist. So what I'm trying to understand is like, are they trying to create something which is physically impossible to create? And have they set up is there a mountain to climb in order to get to the other side, but the other side doesn't exist?
What you're saying is, has it been set up to fail?
There we go.
No.
So much simpler than what I was saying. Such an easier way of saying it.
I'm much older than you, Ollie. I haven't got that much time. That's the difference. I do everything in a rush.
I think it is changing, but it's just the pace is so slow. You know, I think the families of the children who have used cannabis for epilepsy, who are some of the few people who actually have prescriptions via the NHS, we owe them an enormous debt for what they have done to campaign and voice this and raise the profile of this. And that's been extraordinarily helpful.
We saw a video of a baby, well, toddler. Also, she's really like a little tot, having one of those fits. It broke your heart.
Yeah.
With one of the, it broke your heart.
It was with Tanine, yeah.
It was just like,
Tanine, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
and then
brilliant.
what Hannah Deacon's done is incredible. You know what I mean? Like she's always on the forefront fighting for other people. And then you've got, I said, we had Callie Blackwell on the show a few weeks ago, and her story. I mean, but just you know, the amount of energy people have had to take into their own hands to basically, you know, save their kids. It's incredible, but it's also quite sad that they've had to do it alone. Do you know what I mean?
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Their stories are epic and heartrending, to be honest with you. Let's cut to the chase with this, Dr. Moore. What is the worst downside that can happen if someone is prescribed cannabis medicinally? What's the worst?
In terms of side effects, you mean?
Well, in terms of kind of, you know, anything.
Russ wants you to say that someone can die. That's what Russ wants you to say.
I don't. No, Ollie, I don't.
I mean, the worst thing for me that I don't like for people is the cost for them. You know, I hate that this is this great, safe, reliable treatment, but they have to spend hundreds of pounds. You know, and lots of people that I'm working with, you know, can't work because of their mental health diagnosis.
Is it the actual cost, or is it I'm going to be, you know, crude, is it the bumped up cost? Nor would the raw cost be?
Cannabis costs nothing to produce.
Well,
I mean, cannabis
thinking.
costs about 30p a gram to produce if you're producing a high quality medicinal grade cannabis in somewhere like Israel or mass production or Germany or Canada. You're looking about 30p a gram, about 300 a kilo. Okay. Right. Street price is about what's 7 divided by 3? 2,100% markup minimum. A minimum of 2,000% markup. So which is insanity when you think about it. You know, like the average manufacturer to retail markup is like 7 to 10. So I mean, there's a markup of, you know, double, if not 2.5 times what the average consumable product would have. Now, if you go to America, you can find cannabis for very affordable prices. Same in Canada and in Israel, you know, prescriptions are affordable. It costs like 50 to 100 quid a month for your prescription, and your prescription can be up to the equivalent of £500-600 worth of cannabis in the UK a month. So, I mean, the prices are there, and also they make money. It's not a charitable system. It's a system which people pay for, and it's a system which succeeds. I mean, there's enough money to make that system generate, you know, and self-sustain. It's a self-sustainable system at that price. There's no exterior funding or anything. And it's a shame because, you know, we don't have anything like that in the UK. There's nothing in the UK which prescribes to patients in the UK. Is there?
No, I mean, there's some subsidized schemes, and some, you know, some clinics are starting to set up charitable parts of the organization that will allow people to access for slightly cheaper. But no, I mean, you know, most people are spending between 200 to, gosh, you know, £1,000 a month, potentially, depending on what they...
£1,000 a month?
Well, Tanine's paying £1,000 a month, like 1,300, 1,400 for her child.
Yeah, I know.
It's for epilepsy, it's huge, the cost, because they need such high doses.
And that's why people are saying we need to find a new source for Bedrocan and Bedrolite, because Bedrocan and Bedrolite are the go-to for epileptics. But however, it's an extortionate price. And there are other products which are not equivalent. They're called subsidiary products. Okay, they're similar, but they're not the same. and they don't have the same effectiveness according to a lot of the parents who do prescribe their children. It's a hard world. However, we've got 10 minutes left, and we have Rebecca Moore here, who's amazing, and I want to focus on psychiatry for the last 10 minutes. I just wanted to ask you one thing. I want to go back onto PTSD because I feel like it's important, all right? And I want to focus on the fact that there's a big push in America because America respects its veterans, and there's a big push to kind of help the veterans in America. And in the UK, we don't have that. And there are a lot of veterans who do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder who are left alone. What are the drugs given to post-traumatic stress disorder sufferers when they're not consuming cannabis? And as a psychiatrist, does it hurt you to see patients not getting something that could literally help them? Because it's not even on the register in the UK, is it? As in, it's not as easy to get for a PTSD patient in the UK as it is to get for a PTSD patient in America. It's not, or maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's unless you can afford to go to a private clinic. So in terms of treatment, it would typically be therapy, or the evidence base for medication in PTSD is not that great. So typically it would be an antidepressant probably for people, which can be helpful. But the main treatment offered would be therapy or EMDR, which is a particular type of therapy. Whereas in America, you know, they have, like you say, they have whole hospitals just dedicated to care of veterans, and they're amazing in terms of what they offer. But you can get treatment for PTSD here with medicinal cannabis, but it's just you have to pay for it privately.
But that's what first got you into this industry, though, isn't it? I remember you saying that was around 2015. You were looking at all the research going on in America, and you were looking at almost like that was the first thing which basically drew your attention to this industry, was the PTSD and the effects of cannabinoids on PTSD. Now, I wanted to ask, majority of the time when they're using cannabinoids on PTSD, are you using a CBD concoction or a THC concoction or a blend of the two? And then like how are patients like administering themselves? You know, I want to kind of give PTSD patients out there an idea and an insight into what could potentially help them if they're left in the dark.
Yeah, so look, you know, there's no one size fits all, but
of course,
broadly, I would use, you know, I've found that using a balanced blend works really well for people in the day. And then at night, I would give them something specifically for sleep. So either, you know, vaping a sort of indica type flower can be very, very helpful, or using an indica based oil I found to be really helpful for reducing nightmares and getting people to sleep. And then, you know, sometimes people will play around with different blends, you know, and see which one works for them. But for PTSD, I think personally that you need CBD and THC, because you need the THC for the kind of trauma reliving, which is almost like a sort of obsessional. It's not psychotic, but if you think of it as perhaps lying on that spectrum, the THC really helps with that. And the CBD, because obviously people with trauma are really anxious. They're constantly on edge. They're constantly waiting for something else bad to happen. They're scanning for something else that might go wrong.
They're waiting for the shoe to drop.
Exactly.
They're waiting for the other shoe to drop, as they say in America. Can people go to you, Dr. Moore, or what's the process that one could come and find you? I mean, is it a complicated process? Do you have to come through a GP? How does it work?
So it's not complicated. I mean, there are several private medicinal cannabis clinics in the UK now, and they're growing. There's more and more of them. You know, I work for a couple of them. There are lots of other psychiatrists as well working for them. So people can look online and find a clinic that's near to them, although most people are still doing remote consultations. And then they can self-refer themselves, but they just need to also let their GP know that they're coming along, and also share their GP records so that we can have a look at what's been happening for people. But the clinic will help people with all of that. They don't need to worry about doing it themselves. The clinics will help people through the process.
Okay. And is there a huge wait? I'm just thinking, because with the NHS, bless them, they're under such pressure, and with the COVID and what we've been saying on men's radio station is the mental health fallout from this, we've been saying for a year, is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
Just plain horrible.
But what is beautiful is people are willing to talk about it more. So I mean, being a 33-year-old dude who's always been very open about the fact he suffers from mental health issues, I've always been the odd one out in the room. Now I just fit in. Like everyone's so screwed up. It's kind of nice. I'm like everyone's, like everyone talks about it. And the best thing is when I now talk to my friends about the fact that I'm suffering, they're like, yeah, I'm suffering too. I'm like, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? And we kind of bond over the fact that we're all in this boat together. And I'm not saying it's beautiful, because if I could choose to still suffer and they'll be fine, I would choose that. But it's nice knowing full well that I'm not the odd one out in the room. And it's nice that they know they've got someone to turn to. Because, when the world starts to suffer, it suffers together, and then you're not suffering alone in silence. And I feel like that's one of the biggest issues with mental health is we suffer alone in silence. It's really easy to lock ourselves away and tell ourselves that, what we're going through isn't real, and everyone else is okay. So, like what's the word? Like be strong, you'll be okay. Well, you don't have to be strong. You're allowed to feel what you're feeling. And I feel like COVID has enabled people to kind of share that. And also places like mental health and areas like mental health have become so much more of a talking point. Even Russ was saying the radio station has always been mental health focused, but it's booming now on that subject. That's all you guys talk about. And it's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, I'm not taking the mick out of Phil, Dave. But the thing is this. There's huge waiting lists. Before COVID, even if you were really, really depressed, there was about a 6-week waiting list if you were lucky. And please be very clear to everybody listening and watching around the world, and to you, Dr. Moore, I'm not being critical. You can't help it. You're trying to get so much down a hose pipe, you're going to have a backup, right? That number must be rising. Okay, I mean 4.2 million procedures adrift at the moment. 4.2 million. You're never going to catch that up.
10% of the population, isn't it?
It's physically impossible.
It's 10% of the people.
What's the sort of waiting
in the UK
list with yourself? What would that be if somebody had a problem? They could come and see you
for a private appointment clinic. I mean, there's not enough hours in the week for me to see as many people as I would want to see, because this is also only one part of what I do. I don't do this full time. So there are waiting lists for people, but of course we always try and see people as soon as we can. But I don't work in this field full time. I do other things as well.
Why not? Why don't you work with us full time? Why are you part-timing us? No, I got a question. When do you reckon you're ever going to leave the other side behind and be full-time in cannabis, or are you always going to have both toes in both sides? Are you always going to have a toe in each side of the water?
I'm sorry to break it to you, Ollie, but I'm not going to leave my other part, because my other part that I do, is working with pregnant women to support their mental health and around, birth trauma. And that has been my love and my passion for a very long time. So I'm going to do both, and I'm going to do as much as I can, but I'm only human too, and there's only so many hours we can do. What we need is more people to come alongside us, that we can mentor and support. And it's a fantastic place for psychiatrists to work. So I just really hope that more people will feel able to begin to prescribe. And I think the moment you do, you see so many positives and hear so many amazing stories that it just hooks you in, and you just want to be in that field. It's incredibly.
So how do we get them involved?
It's education, isn't it? It's training people at medical school. It's challenging the stigma, the stereotype. It's actually listening to people when they tell their stories. It's listening to Hannah's story. It's listening to Tanine's story. It's, why don't we listen to that and see that as being something that is more important, perhaps, than getting another trial? This is people's lives. This is, it's so powerful.
It's a very weird thing, because I always come away very effective. Well, not every week, Oliver, but most weeks I come away with the guests, and I'm very effective, especially when they're telling their personal stories. Yeah. And you think, well, they shouldn't be going through this. Whatever your views, they shouldn't be suffering like this. And when it involves children, it is, it's hardcore. And it's
the annoying thing is it's so easy to jump on the bandwagon. I mean, like we're sitting here with Dr. Rebecca Moore, she's a normal person. Do you know what I mean? She's I'm saying like I didn't know what I was expecting. I'm thinking if she's pro cannabis, she's obviously going to be a bit, but you're a real normal doctor. And I just still can't get my head around why you've jumped over the fence and others can't and others won't. And you're right, it's an education thing. And
everyone has to be in the vanguard. Some people need to be in the vanguard of any movement. And obviously Becca is in that vanguard. She feels passionate about it.
It's incredible.
You could say, why isn't everybody doing radio shows about mental health? Because they're not. Yeah, so we've developed 2 radio stations just for that. You make a decision. You have been. I'm speaking on behalf of Ollie here. You've been one of my absolute favorite guests. Thank you. No. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being so eloquent. Thank you for being so articulate, for putting across very complicated concepts in such a very clear, easy to understand manner. It means so much to Ollie and I, and it means so much to our listeners all over the world. I can't believe we're out of time. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Ollie Mammon. Always a pleasure, never a chore, as they say. We'll be back, God willing, 6 o'clock next Thursday. Till then, stay